So, anyways, I was watching ELeague, ELeague. Speaking of ELeague, was watching ESL, and I was like, yeah, David looks like he works from home just like I do.
I definitely
Let the
work from
hair go a
home.
little.
It doesn't really matter too much. Most of my
No,
clients are like techies who work from home or don't care about that
yeah.
stuff. So yeah,
So, speaking of ELeague, uh, big announcement, obviously, Invitational. Um, Lots of ground to cover there, but I want to get your hot take on ELeague, and Street Fighter finally gets like its big shot at TV. I think. I mean, we've been on ESPN with Evo and Capcom Cup, but this is I think this is sort of a. I mean, it's a series, right? We get our big shot. What do you think?
it's cool. I've never been one who felt that TV was overly important. But it's cool. You know, I'm happy for the players who are going to be there who have a chance to win a boatload of dough. Um, it's certainly nice that organizations outside of like the core, not just core FGC, but like core sort of people who I think of as esports,
Right.
are taking an interest. I know that uh, ELeague had already existed, so it's not like we're starting right out the gate. But it's nice. It's nice. I am happy for the people involved, and I like that it says that people are taking a look at the FGC. Um, yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's like super important,
Yeah.
but it's nice.
I think it's cool. Have you ever seen any of the previous ELeague CS:GO stuff?
I watched one episode. Yeah, I'm not really a
Uh,
big CS:GO fan. I just watched to see what it looked like.
was it?
Um,
Did you
I
watch
also
on
don't
TV or
have
on
cable,
stream?
so I had to. Yeah, I couldn't
You
watch it
watched
on
the
TV
stream.
because I haven't had cable in half a decade.
Yeah, I'm trying to cut that cord too. Unfortunately, Walking Dead's still important to my girlfriend. Anyway, the reason I ask is just because I've seen both the stream and the show, and I do think it's a really cool production for CS:GO. I'm not a huge CS:GO guy either, but I do think it's a really cool production. So I'm curious to see how it works out for Street Fighter. Uh, but as far as players go, so we know 32 players. They took the top 12 of the CPT global leaderboard, and then the first player from each regional leaderboard that technically wasn't already in the top 12 global. Then they invited 16 other players. Of course, guys that were on the CPT, like mainstays on the CPT, and newer faces like Punk, who showed up at the end. Uh, what do you think? What do you think about those 16? What do you think about the I guess more or less the 16 that were invited? Because it makes sense that the first 16 from the CPT side was invited. But what do you think about
Yeah,
the 16 that were invited?
so okay, so not the CPT folks is what you're
Yeah, I mean,
saying.
because
The rest, sort of the rest.
yeah, we kind of
I
figured.
mean, because
Well,
I don't think anybody has anything to quibble about when it comes to knuckle do whatever, right? Like
right,
that's
exactly,
everybody's cool with
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
Um, so I understand it, and I think almost all of them are good choices. I think they're all good choices. Okay,
hmm
um, uh, they're all good players, right? They've either been fantastic in the past, or they are currently super good. Maybe
right.
Punk's the best player in the country. I don't know, right? I mean, he could be. So I and obviously Alex Valle has a ton of history in stuff. Gutek's what has been the American SBO representative to things. I mean, he's a
hmm
really strong player, and Guilty is a strong player too, who is has often been a threat at regionals around the country and has been traveling more lately, so she's been getting stronger.
Right.
Um, Other than I feel like it's only those three that people have talked about as being like kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of the selections are, in my view, very hard to argue with. Certainly, some of them could have been swapped out for any number of other people, but
hmm
as far as like one of those persons versus somebody else who could have been in my mind, very similar levels, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not a big. Um, it wouldn't have been a big surprise if it were one of the other people, but at the same time, the people who they picked are all very defensible. It's I guess also there's sort of the qualification round, right? So only 24 people actually get into like the series, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
And so uh, it might even be that some of those folks aren't, well, certainly some of them will not be in the final series, right? They're going to have to qualify for it from that list of 32. And to the extent that anybody believes that some of those players are not the best, then they should believe that they'll be weeded out, I guess. So I sort of don't think that it's an issue either way. But at the same time, if like it'd be super sick if Guilty beat X or Y people to get into the 24, right? Like that would be fantastic, because not only does that show that she is really strong. I mean, I play against her regularly online. She's a strong player. It not only would it show that, but it's also kind of shuts people up, I guess. Like, look, I'm good enough to have beaten these other players to have qualified into the rest of the thing. So what's the point of complaining? So, but if she doesn't make it also, then you still kind of get why they chose her. She's a strong player who has a very interesting life and story and personality and looks. I mean, she's an interesting choice. And it's TV. And I feel that way about the other choices too. Li Joe is a strong player. Obviously, he made top 8 at Evo. Is he regularly making top 8s right now? Not super often. But not only has he proven himself a super strong player, but you can't discount the TV factor of his dad. He's a good looking dude. I mean, he's a very nice, well spoken guy. Like those are concerns for a TV production. Sure. And so if you're the kind of player who is strong, but maybe like doesn't have the rest of the entertainment package, I don't know, then I get why you weren't the one picked. That's all. And if that did happen to anybody, then I guess it should be kind of a wake-up call. You need to focus on the other aspects of this thing too. I never want to get to a point where we feel like we're a full show rather than a tournament. I don't want to get involved in that, but it's impossible to deny that the other aspects are in there. That's relevant for getting sponsors and getting people to watch and advertisers, all that stuff. It's relevant. So it's something you have to concentrate on. And that's certainly, I'm sure, a big part of why they chose some of the people that they did.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely some personality factor with some of the choices. Some I think veterans, and of course, top players. Are there any players that you were surprised either got the invite or maybe even didn't get the invite? Players you felt like should be there or you wanted to see in this 32 player invitational?
Well, I think it's impossible to quibble with the first set of players that were selected, people who were in CPT and so forth. I mean, everybody knows that they're all great players. That's not an issue. I mean, Julio being in there, Julio is a super strong player who has had some injury issues, and I know that that's sidelined him a bit. I hope that he'll be okay. That would be my only sort of qualm with that. But as long as that's going to be cool, then it's all cool with me. When it comes to the rest of the players invited, I don't really think that there were more deserving people. I mean, equally as deserving, maybe. Right. But that means that it's kind of just a choice either way. And I was saying, I understand why they chose the people that they did. I think they're all strong players who have, in many cases, either, there's some extra sort of grab about them, their background, who they are, their sort of appearance / well-spokenness, how articulate they are, things like that. Are they from different part of the world, right? So there's other things that I think went into it, but they're all strong players. So, if you're, I would love to see, players who I love to watch. I'd love to watch like Infectious Zengi. I mean, like things like that. But that's just my own bias, and that's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's because I'm gonna love to watch the people who are in it. So equally as deserving, but I don't think more deserving. No.
Yeah. What about UltraDavid's Geef? I watched you blow up Sajam a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, if this was 2009, 2010, and esports was as big back then as it is now, then yeah, man, I totally, for sure, I definitely believe that would be in the top 32 or whatever. I used to win tournaments, but that was 7 years ago now, so dang, that's a long time ago. I am definitely not deserving.
I don't think we've actually spoken since season two launched. And I think one of the things that I find interesting about ELeague and the player selection is, of course, with some of these players, we don't know necessarily who they might even be using. I guess as a main, infiltration comes to mind. I think he says the impression is he's going to play Jury. But then we've seen the rise, of course, of the Lauras, the boxers, the Balrogs, the boxers, the Urians, of course. But I find it interesting that players from the East Coast, and we're seeing this play out, I think, on ESL every week. Players from the East Coast are really strong, and these characters that have been buffed up or that are just better in season two are really dominating, I guess, even in the tier list, right? How much of that do you think plays in to what may happen at ELeague as far as like how well these East Coast players do, or even these players, using the Lauras, the Balrogs, and the Urians?
Not a lot. Not a lot. I feel like with the exception of maybe the bottom couple or a few characters, I feel like season two actually has more viable characters than season one did. And certainly characters at the top are strong, but I also feel that characters in the middle are strong. I don't feel like there are bad characters. I mean, even Fang. I know that some people have been winning tournaments with Fang. So as much as I think he's terrible, he's not terrible, right? So I think that the tiers are probably not super important. Some of those players. I mean, you mentioned Infiltration. Jury, I don't happen to think particularly high of. Right. I could be wrong about that because season two hasn't started yet, and while the game has been out for a couple of months, season two has been out for a couple of months.
Yeah,
I haven't seen like the best Jury. I've tried her myself. I played against my friends who used her. I don't know how representative that is of whether she's strong, and I feel like that's probably the case for a lot of things. It seems like some characters are very strong, but for example, the more I play against Urian, the more I find the weaknesses, and I think he's very good, but like he's not unbeatable. And I feel the same for all the characters that you mentioned. So I don't really think that that's a major deal. Just looking through the player list, there's a ton of different characters represented. Yep. And as you mentioned, we don't even know who some of these people are going to be playing. Infiltration, what's LPN going to show up with, right? I mean, he could be anything. What's apparently Punk going to show up with, who plays who knows how many characters at this point.
Cooking people with secondaries.
Yeah, or even tertiaries. So I don't know. I don't know what he's going to show up with. So I'm not concerned about the tiers. I will also say that Capcom said that it's going to change things, and while they didn't confirm that that's going to be the balance, they didn't say explicitly balance changes are coming. I think everybody expects that. Yeah. So whether Urian will be even a good character come ELeague is too soon to say. Yeah. I just don't think that we can really, even if there were no changes made, but if there are changes made, then certainly it's going to be really, really hard to know. So part of why I like the players who were selected is that they do have a pretty good list of characters there, pretty good variety, and not just of the characters, but also in terms of how the people play, right? Some of the people who have same characters play differently, different styles. So there's a lot of different stuff represented there. I'm not really concerned that the character choice is going to be the end of the conversation.
Right. One thing I noticed last year, and I'm sure you and others did as well, was like sort of the evolution throughout the year. We just talked about sort of like the characters or players that are playing the top tier characters at the moment, but that for the most part that kind of evolved and changed. Yes, some of the top characters were still at the top from beginning to end, but we've seen like that change. It took place sort of every couple months, really. Tokido and Infiltration were the strongest players the first few months, and then it kind of evolved, and then GamerB won a couple premier events with Nikali. It looked like he finally learned how to sort of play the game. Not that he didn't know how to play, but whatever clicked with him, he adapted to that. Do you think that's something we'll see similar to this year, where the players and the characters will evolve to the point that we'll kind of see the same type of, I guess, I don't know, peaks and valleys, I guess is probably the best way to describe it?
It happens in every game, and it's definitely going to happen in season two. It
Yeah.
happens in games that are 5 years old, let alone 1 year old, which is what
Yeah.
Street Fighter V is. And season two is a couple of months. And if there is a balance change coming up, then it's, whenever that comes up, right?
Sure.
It's effectively new. So that's gonna change things. It always does. There are always people who figure things out faster, but who maybe don't end up with the highest ceiling. I mean, Infiltration and Tokido are people who can end up with the highest ceiling, but
Right.
when it came to last year, they jumped out to a start, and then Infiltration even said later, like, he didn't adapt in the ways, he didn't change in the ways he needed to, um, and I think that was something that all of us saw. So, yeah, of course I expect that. I would be very surprised if it was the opposite. I'd be very surprised if whoever won final round was still the best at Capcom Cup, because that's
Yeah.
been so rare. I mean, think about the lifetime of Street Fighter 4. There were, so few repeat dominant performances. You had the year of Infiltration, Cien was in there, Daigo won stuff at the start, but each of these things changed, right?
Yeah.
None of them lasted, because there were new players. Things, the game itself changed, obviously a few times, but people's understandings of the game changed. Probably even more importantly, if you go back to think how Super Street Fighter 4 was played, I think we were probably playing that game totally wrongly, and we were probably totally wrong about who the good characters were because we just didn't understand the engine yet. And I'm sure that's the case for Street Fighter 5 also.
Right.
I'm sure that even if there are changes in Street Fighter 5, 4 years later, we're going to think back to this last year and think, wow, we were some scrubs. I could go back
Yeah.
as Joe, 0-2, right, at tournament, and got out of my pool at Evo, year one, because
Yeah.
you just learn more, and when you learn more, things change. So yeah, of course, there's going to be peaks and valleys in different players' careers, and they're going to be the same when it comes to how we think about the characters.
So we've seen this generation of young players that we've seen guys like NuckleDo, who's only 20 years old, but he's been playing for a few years now. So it's kind of weird that we're actually used to him playing at a high level, right? It's I don't know, that's strange to me. But we're seeing a lot of with Street Fighter V, a newer generation, a new crop of players, young players that aren't just good, like they're dominating. The Punks, even Smug, who we've seen him for a few years, but doing really well lately. Do you think there is something to the idea of like these young players being dominant because is this a young man's game, or is it a situation where they don't have to sort of unlearn or deal with like having played different Street Fighters, and that's what makes them so dominant in this game right now?
I don't think that it's a young person's game. No, um, I just think that you can become strong at strategy games at like a younger age. You don't have to finish graduate school, like, right? Like, you don't have to be late 20s or whatever. You can be strong at a strategy game when you're younger. There are people who have been strong at chess when they're young. Like, it's not a
Right.
young person's game. It's just the sort of length of time, the maturity, I guess, required to be a strong player in a strategic game. Uh, you attain it quicker than you do for some other things, So
Yeah.
I think that that's really what it is, and I'm happy that there are younger players, because that means that there's like a future, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and I mean, it's not just in North America. That's some of the European players who are
Yep.
strongest are
Phenom.
young.
Yeah.
Same, yeah. Phenom, for example, John Takeuchi is a teenager,
Mhm.
and he just won Can Winter Clash from Japan. So yeah, you can be good at a young age. I mean, Justin Long was winning Evos when he was 15 years old.
Right.
That's how it goes. And it's not the case that everybody was young, or everybody was that age back then. There were people in even the early 2000s who I knew who were in their 30s, right? Who are competing. So that age range has always been there. At the same time, you got people who are up in their high 30s who are still some of the best players in the world. Sako is still fantastic. He has
Yeah.
a wife and kid, and he's like an adult, right? He's in his late 30s, and I expect that won't change. I don't know why he would be good now and not good when he's 50. Like I
Right.
feel like if he was gonna have like arthritis, like it would, that's might have already been an issue for him. Like so I just feel like he's gonna be cool for like another while. Um, and I guess what I expect out of fighting games uh, is that the effective range of people who can compete is just going to keep growing because the people who started when they were X age are going to be X plus 50 at some point, right?
Right.
I'm going to be an old man at some point, and I'm not going to not be playing fighting games because I've just been doing that forever. That's my hobby. Not going to go away. So, but at the same time, while that's happening, while I'm still in there and everybody else is still in there are going to be new people. And
Yeah.
when you get to like your late teens, you can be a super strong player. That's just how it's always been. Um, while you got Do and Punk, they might be the best two players in the States right now. Hard to say exactly. And they're young. That's not an unprecedented situation. That's happened
Sure.
before in fighting games. It's also been the case that the best players have been in their late 20s, early 30s. That's how it was for the later stages of Street Fighter IV. Right? Almost all of
Yeah.
the best players were in that age range. Some of the people were in their late 30s. Sako won Capcom Cup, right? He was, I don't know, late 30s at the time. So, yeah, it's not a young person's game. It's just that young people can have a game, but so can older people.
Do you think that the design of Street Fighter V, though, sort of facilitates? And this isn't even, I think, just a question for young people, because I think this applies to new people, like people new to, I guess, Street Fighter competition, whether they're completely new to fighting games or if they played other fighting games and came into Street Fighter V. Do you think the design of Street Fighter V facilitates them just being, I guess, or makes it easier for them to be that much better than previous games?
You mean new players?
It For new players or young players, yeah, in general.
No, no. I don't think that Street Fighter V is designed in a way that makes it, at least at a high level, more susceptible to new players.
Yeah.
Certainly when it comes to the intro level, I think that it is easier in some ways. There are just some
So like the
executional
floor and
barriers
ceiling
that aren't
probably
there as
closer.
strong. Floor and ceiling may be closer. Yeah, I don't know that the ceiling is any lower down,
Right.
but maybe like you're starting on the second floor instead of ground floor. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not even that much, honestly.
Yeah.
You're maybe on the first floor. Maybe you've stepped a few stairs up the stairs. I don't know. Whatever. There's not that huge of a difference. Keep in mind, like I said, there have been times when the best players in fighting games were also young. And it's not just in fighting games. There have been times when the best players in StarCraft were teenagers, right? And everybody goes on about that game for strategic depth and executional issues, right? The extent that I don't know if they call it executions per se, but there's a lot of manual dexterity involved in that stuff. And it's the same way with other esports. And, again, I don't see that this game in particular is designed in a way to make it easy at a high level. Just maybe at an intro level, but I think at a high level, it's going to be a tough game. That's how Street Fighter IV was. When Street Fighter IV came out, so many people thought that was the easiest game in the world, and a lot of people quit who were in the FGC. A lot of people quit Street Fighter IV to move on to other things because they just felt it was too simple and easy. By the time that game was over, 6-7 years later, it was hard to get into. There was so much stuff to know. There were so many characters. There was so much tech and so many ideas and everything. Just you had to know so many things. And it became executionally difficult in some cases. It was super easy at the start. And, we figured things out that made it harder. And I have no doubt that that'll happen with Street Fighter V because it's happened with everything. Every game's been that way, ever. There's no game that comes out that stays easy to play. When I first played League of Legends, I thought that was a baby's game. All right, I thought it was super simple. I was great at it without trying. Everybody else sucked. And then not that long later, I stopped playing. Other people kept playing. Not that long later, I came back and I was like, okay, this is super hard actually now because the level of play skyrocketed. That happens in every game. It'll happen in Street Fighter V too.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that right now with like season two, where people just in general, I mean, you can hop online and people just in general are, I think, better. The game's been out for a year, new season, people are grinding a little bit more with the new season and stuff.
And even
Um,
on top of that, I would say that the level of play when it comes to lower level players is much higher than it was
yeah,
in
exactly.
earlier fighting games. Nowadays you can watch so easily, you can get better ideas of what to do so easily, can learn so much more easily and so much faster.
Yeah,
I mean, thinking back, I mean, we were probably not that great at fighting games in the early mid 2000s, but if you had to win a tournament that had 30 people, you just didn't have to. The barriers were not there. The
yeah,
same sort of. I've always thought that if you have uh, 100 people in a room and you thought, okay, who's the best fighting game player here? You pick them out, and then you put that same group of people into a room of 10,000 people and you say, who's the best fighting game player here? It's probably not one of the people who are in the 100, just by
yeah,
numbers. It's just probably
yeah.
not. So I think that now with so many more people playing, the level of play, even at lower levels, I feel is higher. Certainly at higher levels, it's higher, but at lower levels too.
All right, so going back to ELeague real quick, are there any specific matchups that you would like to see at ELeague, whether it's players or just there's certain. I mean, like we talked about earlier, we don't know exactly who everyone's playing, but we kind of have an idea. So based on players and season two characters, nerfs, buffs, whatever, any matchups you specifically want to see?
I think what I'm super excited about at ELeague or elsewhere is the idea of NuckleDu versus Punk. I don't know which one of those is the best player in the US, but I really think it's one of them. Really
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
Uh, I don't know which one it's going to be. Um, I'm excited for that. Uh, when it comes to character matchups, um, I think I don't feel bored by any character matchup in this game. There's nothing that
yeah,
I watch that I think that's not interesting. Which is rare for me, actually. There's usually some character I think is super boring. I don't play everybody, but I'm not bored watching anybody. So I'm looking forward to, I think, a lot of the matchups. I want to see how Fudo keeps doing with Mika. He's been doing well in Topanga, but
hmm
does that continue? If it is Jury for infiltration, what does he have that makes the character seem strong to him? I'm not sure.
yeah,
What are his ideas? He tends to have really interesting ideas about things. Does Daigo stick with Ryu? I kind of hope not. But if he does and he figures it out, then that's super cool. What does he do to make that work? I mean, I'm not particularly uh, like I don't need to see any one particular thing other than
yeah.
I think Do versus Punk. I just think it's going to be a ton of great Street Fighter.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably the the marquee matchup right now is Do versus Punk. If that happens, that'd be great.
It'd be
Um,
awesome to see Punk versus the international players. How does he
mhm,
do well there? Though Do's done fine. Obviously, won Capcom Cup, but even
yeah,
before that, he was strong against internationals. Does he continue there? It'd be cool to see one of the people who I'm not looking to be fantastic turn up and be super great. Maybe Marn is going to win Evo again this year. He is a former Evo winner, right? People I think forget that, but he has actually won Evo before. So you never know who's going to be really strong, and I'm really excited about all of that.
all right. I mentioned before. Actually, one of the first times I've seen you play Street Fighter V was when you guys were playing. What was it, a few weeks ago on ESL? I know you play Geef, and I figured your Geef was pretty solid. But I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised. It was Um,
Yeah.
and side note, Filthy Rich was up here in Seattle recently, and so I was joking with him about how you told Sajam that you hadn't been playing Geef, and then he brought up what about the sets you played with Filthy Rich?
It's
It's
true.
like, oh yeah, I did that.
I did do that. Look, I used to. I mean, I didn't. I wasn't asked to start commentating because I was terrible, right? Like I don't know.
Well, so that's what
It's
I was
like a
going to ask
weird
you. You
idea.
talked about back in '09, '09 UltraDavid probably could have, won some tournaments. Maybe if
He did.
things were the way they were, if things were back then the way they are now,
Hmm.
what is there a possibility? What could get UltraDavid, '09 UltraDavid, come back into 17 and compete? What could bring UltraDavid out of retirement and compete?
Uh, not to be too much of a downer, but if you can find a solution for cervical radiculopathy at
I know the health
C7,
issues. Yeah.
and if you can find a cure for Raynaud's disease, then you let me know. You let me know,
Okay.
and maybe I'll be able to play. But
All right. Modern science.
even on top of that, to go back to the idea of 100 players versus 10,000. If I were at my like max level, whatever theoretical level that is, I really don't think that I would like win Capcom Cup. I really don't think that I would win a major. I really don't think that, because the people who were dominant back then are just good now.
Yeah.
They're not dominant. They're just good. I never beat Justin Wong in anything. He always beat me in tournament. He is now a good player and not dominant, right? I don't know why I would expect to be better than he is. So I feel like if you weren't one of those like few sort of half dozen people who were dominant back in the day, then you're not going to have won stuff today, because there are, again, just such a bigger player pool. I might have won tournaments that had 100 people in them, but I never approached anything that was 5,000 like at Evo, and I couldn't even tell you what I hear some of the players talk about like the mental stress of it. I have literally no experience in that. Like when I stopped playing, the highest tournament ever was maybe 1,000. I don't know. Completely different experience.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I would be up there. I mean, name anybody, and if they weren't, Justin Wong or max level Alex Valle or Mike Watson or John Choi or seriously just a half dozen people, I think that they are not relevant in Street Fighter V today, outside of maybe they can get top 8, but probably not going to win.
Right. David, always appreciate your time. I know you're going to be busy this year with Capcom Pro Tour stuff again, and of course ESL for as long as that continues. Looking forward to you, James, being in the booth, and of course the Steves, the whole Ultra Chin crew. Good luck with everything this year, and hopefully we'll talk soon in person.
That would be great. Thanks a lot.